It's been a while since I made my Custom Freeze Comet Stormweaver leveling video, so it's finally time to show you an updated version of the build during early endgame. Unfortunately, I wasn't able to play that much recently. I have been focusing on making videos and writing Maxroll guides, so I just yesterday reached tier 5 maps. This is exactly why I haven't made an updated version of the build yet, because I haven't changed that much. But now I finally feel like that I progressed the build enough to the point where I do have quite a lot to talk about. Also, since then, there have been a lot of similar versions of the build showing up with things like Cast on Crit, Cast on Ignite, some on Stormweaver, some on other ascendancies, but I decided to stick with what I am doing, and I'm gonna try to progress it as much as I can. One key difference you might have noticed in the background is that now I am using Spark. But don't worry, we are not a lightning damage build. Spark just replaces Frostbolt as an activator for the freeze, but more on that later. So in my last video I was talking about how to craft energy shield gear, so let's now summarize what I was talking about in that video, but if you want to know everything you need to know about energy shield, make sure to check it out. So first thing that I did after I finished the campaign, I was focusing on my defenses because when I reached maps, I was dying quite a lot. So what I did is I decided to go hybrid. So I ended up having around 1.3k life and around 3k energy shield. And to do that, I crafted this chest. So basically you want to have as much energy shield and as much life as you can on your chest, and then on suffixes some attributes and resistances. So this is what I was using. And then second thing you want to focus on is the helmet, because on the chest and helmet you can get the most amount of energy shield. So this is the helmet I was using, just a lot of energy shield and not that much life. And then on my gloves, I go to 130 life because gloves and boots actually don't give that much energy shield. You get most of it from the chest and the helmet, so I focused a bit on life here. And these boots, I actually bought them on trade, and I bought them because I was kind of annoyed with chaos resist because I was dying to chaos damage. So these boots actually have 123 energy shield, but they also have 17 chaos resist. And of course, you want high movement speed, so 20% movement speed. On the belt, unfortunately, you cannot get any energy shield, so I fixed my resistances here. It actually is missing one prefix, but I'm probably gonna use a different belt soon, so I'm not exalting it. Then on my amulet, I'm still using the same one that I actually was using during the campaign. I'm just using it for the spirit. I'm probably gonna replace it soon, but it's still pretty nice to have some additional mana regen, cast speed, and crit chance. And on the ring, I again just have some life, attributes, resistance, and mana regen. So basically on your entire gear, you just want to focus on high energy shield, high amount of life, attributes, resistances, mana regen, and then some custom modifiers like cast speed, crit chance, and that's basically it. And on amulet, you want to have one spirit roll, or on the chest, preferably on amulet. Now I actually swapped to chaos inoculation, so I fully swapped to energy shield. I'm no longer using life, so I crafted this chest. This has pretty good amount of energy shield, 619, where this one had 443. And it also has implicit mana regen, so this is actually a pretty good chest. Also, I was using earlier a staff with +6 to cold skills, but I found this wand. This one has +4 to cold skills and some cold and spell damage. It's not the best, but it's pretty good. And it also has 53% increased freeze buildup, which is pretty nice. And I also found this focus, which has +2 to all spells. So a lot of people are asking me, is it better to use staff or is it better to use wand or focus? And in my opinion, it just doesn't matter. If you have better staff than wand and shield or focus, use staff. If you have good wand and good focus, use wand and focus. That's basically it. The only two differences between these is that when you are using one hand, you can use focus for just higher amount of energy shield, or you can choose to equip shield for better defenses. You can get block from shield, but you're not gonna get any damage. And the second difference is when you're using staff, you can get either Sigil of Power or Freezing Shards. And Freezing Shards is actually one of the most powerful tools to freeze enemies. So it is actually a pretty good skill for this build. But yeah, it's not like super insane, but if you can get it, I would probably try to get Freezing Shards as a high level. I just don't really like using it because then if you want to have higher level Freezing Shards, you need to drop or buy higher level stuff. So you cannot increase level of freezing shards by just finding a higher level uncut skill gem. And in terms of my tree, what I was using is basically the same tree that I have right now, except I did not have this section. And I had here mana regeneration, so ether flow, and I also had energy shield here, enhanced barrier. So that was the only difference that I did on my tree before I swapped to spark. And of course I didn't have chaos inoculation. Another thing is energy. I no longer use this one node. People ask me about why I am no longer using it, and that is because I reached high level of custom freeze. When you reach, I believe, level 14, maybe 15, I'm not 100% sure, you no longer need this point because each level actually increases the amount of energy you generate with custom freeze. It doesn't show here, but when you go to your skills and you look here at the tooltips, it's actually gonna show more. So it is 32% for me right now. And all you have to do is freeze an enemy and see how much percentage it is gonna show up here in the corner. Actually, I have to activate it just to show you. Okay, so here you can see 0%. If you're gonna freeze something, if it's going to show either 0 or 100%, you're good. If it ever is showing something different, like let's say 96%, 95%, then you need this energy shield point on 3. But if it never is showing anything between 0 and 100%, you're good, you can remove it. Of course, you have to test it without it. But eventually, I decided to swap to full energy shield, so chaos inoculation. So what are benefits of that? Well, you're immune to chaos damage, and that's basically it. And I'm losing around 1000 life. So overall, you are less tanky to just everything else other than chaos damage, but you are immune to chaos damage. And the reason why I did it, well, because I did 3 maps, and 3 maps in a row I died to chaos damage, and I just told myself, no more, I'm just gonna go CI. I don't care, I want to be immune to chaos damage, and now I am good. And having around 4.5k shield is still very, very good amount of just overall energy shield pool, so I don't feel like I need that extra 1k. Okay, so now let's talk about what I did after. So after I would say I reached maybe like tier 3, tier 4, that's when I actually did my third ascendancy. And if you don't know what you have to do to get your third ascendancy point, is you have to do the trial of Sekema with number of trials 3 and area level has to be at least 65 plus. So that's basically how you do it. You're not gonna get it from Inscribed Ultimatum. Apparently, to be able to get it from Inscribed Ultimatum, it has to be area level at least 75 and it has to be 10 trials. So maybe that is gonna work, but it's probably easier to just do it from the trial of Sekema. And what I did is I removed Arcane Surge, so now I'm no longer recovering 20% more mana, but I got Strike twice and Shaper of Storm. This basically make it so all of my cold damage can shock, and shock can be applied twice. This basically means that anytime I am attacking with, let's say, the Frostbolt or Eye of Winter or even Comet, most of the time I actually am shocking with Comet, gonna apply shock, and that shock is just gonna increase your damage by 20%. And if you have 2 shocks, it's gonna be overall just 40%, or I guess 20% twice. And this is when I swapped to this area because I wanted to get some shock magnitude. And this also gives you some additional mana regen. So this is exactly why I felt like I no longer need this. Of course, you can still take it, but we are kind of tight on points. There's not that many things I can drop, and I especially don't want to drop any energy shield recharge nodes because they are pretty important. I did drop these energy shield nodes because I don't think they give that much energy shield. Of course, I would prefer to have them, but I had to drop something. And I also went for these points because they do give quite a lot of damage and it's not that many points. And my next level is gonna be Echoing Thunder for 30% elemental damage if I shocked enemy recently, because I am shocking decently often. And then after that I can get additional freeze build up over here. And when I did that, I started to think about what are some other ways to freeze and shock at the same time. Because up until that point I was using Frostbolt, and Frostbolt was dealing enough damage to just almost always freeze, and it was pretty good. But at some point during maps I didn't do enough damage, so Frostbolt felt kinda awkward. It was still decent, but it was not the best, so I started to test Eye of Winter. And Eye of Winter is pretty good, but it also doesn't deal crazy amount of damage. But in combination, Frostbolt plus Eye of Winter, it actually worked pretty well. Because the way Eye of Winter works is that it deals more damage when it passes through some kind of ground surface. And Frostbolt always creates the chilling ground. So what I was doing is I was using both Frostbolt and Eye of Winter. So just to show you, I'm gonna put it here. I was using Frostbolt and then Eye of Winter, so it passes through the ground and it was doing more damage. And it was actually doing pretty well. And that's actually a good time to talk about what are some of the basically what I would call activators. So things that make this build work so we can start proccing a cast on freeze. And I would actually say that probably one of the better ones is just using freezing shards because it just does everything. It does pretty good damage. It's also a very good single target because you can shotgun. All of the projectiles from freezing shards can hit one target. It has pretty good range and it's freezing like almost always. So it's pretty good. The only bad thing about it is that you have to use Garrett Staff, which is the one that provides the skill. And I just didn't have that, so that's why I was not using it. Other one, like I already mentioned, Frostbolt, it is pretty good, but you really need high damage and also freeze buildups for it to work. Eventually, it's just no longer that amazing. And Eye of Winter, you can use it by itself. I know some people are doing it, but I found it to not look that great, so I was using it in combination. But then I figured out that maybe we can actually use some lightning skills to freeze and shock. And how can we do that? Well, first, there is this one item called Free Dragon Solid Mask, and this one makes it so cold damage from his contribute to ignite magnitude, and lightning damage contributes to freeze buildup instead of shock. But remember that we do have an ascendancy, which make it so all of the hits shock. So if we are using this helmet, lightning damage from hits contributes to freeze buildup instead of shock. So let's say you are using something like Spark, then your lightning damage from Spark is gonna freeze enemies. But we are still using things like Comet when it procs the cast on freeze, and Comet is still going to freeze. And cold damage no longer contributes to the chill magnitude, so we don't care too much about that. So we still can freeze with cold damage, but now we're gonna ignite instead, which is actually in some cases even better to do it this way, because then you can get something like this, so increase the elemental damage when you ignited enemy recently. If we have all three elements, so freeze, ignite, and shock. But now we no longer have chill, so maybe you don't have this one. But yeah, this is basically the first way to do it, but it is kind of awkward because we are losing a lot of energy shield because our helmet usually gives a lot of energy shield, and also we are not shocking and freezing with the same ability. We are shocking with the cold abilities, so with the Comet, and we are freezing with the, let's say, Spark as a lightning damage. So I actually found a different way to do it, and that is through this ring, which is called a Brotherhood. And this one make it so all of the lightning damage is converted to cold. So now, let's say you are using Spark, your Spark is dealing, instead of lightning damage, it is doing cold damage, so cold damage can freeze, so your Spark can freeze, but also Spark will still shock, because all of the hits can shock thanks to Shaper of Storms. And what does that basically enable us to do is to use any lightning ability we want to do. So I tested Ball Lightning, I tested Arc, and I tested Spark, and to be honest, out of all of them, Spark looks the best. Arc is actually very similar, it's also pretty good. Ball Lightning is kind of awkward, but the only good thing about Ball Lightning is that you can cast it in combination with Lightning Warp, so you can Lightning Warp on top of it. So just to show you how it works, you can cast a Ball of Lightning and then you press and you can just teleport, so it's actually pretty good for mobility. But it's kind of awkward to deal damage. You have to wait for the ball to reach the enemy, so I didn't really like it. And the best thing about using the Spark is that it kind of just spreads out everywhere. You no longer have to aim. Let's say there are some doors or something, it passes through basically everything. It just goes everywhere, so I really like using Spark. Now, if this ring goes up in price because of this video, don't worry about it too much. It's mostly quality of life. It doesn't really matter that much. Maybe in the future I'm gonna figure out some additional things that this helps with. But for now, to be honest, if you're using Eye of Winter with Frostbolt, it's still perfectly fine. The only issues with that is that you have to do like 2 buttons combo, which can be kind of annoying. With Spark, you're using just one ability. And I just remembered that I forgot to mention what jewels I am using. So for now, I'm just using mostly for mana on kill. 2%, you can get ones with just 1%, and just any other energy shield modifier. So energy shield from focus, energy shield recharge. Here I have some maximum energy shield and crit damage bonus. Here I have some shock duration, shock magnitude. So whatever you can find on top of the mana on kill. So just anything for energy shield or for the damage or freeze build-up, something like that. So these are my jewels. Now let's finally talk about the skills that I was using, starting with the ones that I just talked about. So when I was using Frostbolt, I was using it with the scatter shot, so you shoot 2 projectiles in addition, so you shoot 3 total. And on top of that, you always want to use Glaciation with whatever skill you are using to proc the freeze. And now, if you do have the Ascendancy for the all of the hits can apply shock, I would recommend using something like conduction so that you are more likely to shock. You can also use some other things that benefit shocks like overcharge, so this is gonna make your shocks stronger, but they are gonna have less duration, so it's actually not that amazing because our Ascendancy already gives us 50% less shock, so with this our shocks are gonna last only 1 second, so it's not that amazing on Frostbolt. So I would recommend using probably either Control Destruction, just so you deal more damage with Frostbolt, so it has easier time to freeze, or if you want to shock more likely, if you have the third Ascendancy, go for Conduction. Now, for the Frostbolt with Eye of Winter, I was using Eye of Winter with Unleash, because then when you use it, it just unleashes the 3 Eye of Winters instead of 1. The one issue with that is that when you do it this way, it actually costs decent amount of mana, so you're gonna be burning through your mana, so that's like kind of another reason why I prefer to go Spark. And now you actually have a choice because both of these are gonna build up the freeze, but Eye of Winter is gonna do it more. So I would recommend putting Glaciation here with Unleash. And now you have some options. Let's say you want to have something like maybe Arcane Surge. Did I take out Arcane Surge here? No. So because the Eye of Winter costs a lot of mana, you can put Arcane Surge here. So you're gonna proc Arcane Surge from time to time if you no longer have Arcane Surge from this Ascendancy. If you still have it, you can go for, just like I was using earlier, Control Destruction. Then on Frostbolt, you can just, because we are freezing mostly with Eye of Winter, on Frostbolt you can just increase your speed with, let's say, acceleration, so it travels faster, or you can also use the Arcane Tempo. Let me quickly find it where I have it. Here it is. So you can use Arcane Tempo on the Frostbolt and then maybe something like acceleration, or if you are already shocking, you can use conduction and maybe in combination with overcharge or something else for shocking. There's actually multiple things that are useful. For example, you just go here and type shock. You can use, where is it? Cursing Current. This is gonna make it so your shocks spread, so it's good for clear. Lasting Shock for increased shock duration, but less chance to shock. This is also pretty good. So you have a lot of options. You don't have to go for just one setup. There's a lot of things that you can decide for yourself which one do you want to go for. And now, what I am using now, because I am with the Spark, what I am using is Glaciation. Again, you always want to use Glaciation with whatever you are using to activate it. And after that, I am using the Arcane Tempo, so it casts faster. And the third one is something that I'm still kind of testing. I was using for a while the Unleash, so that I'm unleashing a lot of sparks. So just to show you how it looks, just press it and it's a lot of them. But we are casting it a lot, so only, I would say, every 2, maybe every 3 sparks are gonna have Unleash on them, so it's not like insane. So I actually swapped Unleash to the energy barrier. And this makes it so whenever you are just casting Spark, and we are casting it very often, and you get stunned, you are gonna immediately trigger your energy shield recharge. So you basically have easier times against stuns. Because when you are a CI, now you have issues with being stunned and being frozen because we don't have any life. And the ailment and stun threshold is based on your lives, and we are not really investing into any ailment threshold or stun threshold. So now for freezing, I'm using this charm, and for stunning, I was thinking about using this. But so far, it actually haven't been that amazing. I haven't really been getting stunned that much. So maybe I was thinking about using something like acceleration, so that Spark just travels faster, covers a better area. You can also use the Pierce. I don't think I have it here. I should have it in my stash full. Here it is. You can pierce so that it hits more target. There is a lot of options. Of course, if you get eventually 5-link, that's probably what I would do. Maybe I would go for pierce and acceleration. But for now, I'm using glaciation with arcane tempo and the where is it? Energy barrier. And another option would be conduction, so it actually has a higher chance to shock. So again, we are using Spark to trigger freeze and shock, and it is dealing actually cold damage, not lightning damage, thanks to Call of the Brotherhood. So that's what I was using as my main ability right now. Now for the next one, Cast on Freeze. In Cast on Freeze, of course, we want to use with the Comet, and you need impetus to have 100% energy every single time we freeze. And then the last one is actually kinda debatable what you want to do. If you want to use more damage, use Spell Echo. If you want to have higher coverage, so more area, you can take out from Frostwall Spell Cascade, and it's gonna cast 3 instead of 1 comets, like next to each other. Or if you want to lose less mana, you can use Inspiration. Now, of course, if you have 5-link and you're asking me what should you use on 5-link, all of these are pretty good options. So for now, I actually was using Spell Echo because I felt like I'm not doing enough damage, so that's what I was using, and always remember to activate it. Now on the second Comet, I am using Hourglass with Inevitable Critical and Super Critical, and this I am only using on some rares and bosses when they are frozen. I am guaranteed that I'm not gonna just die whenever I'm casting it because it takes a long time to cast, but it deals very good amount of damage, so it's a button that I don't press too often, but when I don't have anything else, it is pretty useful to have it. Now the third one is the Elemental Invocation, and a lot of people are asking me where to get it, how does this work, why they cannot support it with something. And first of all, it's called Elemental Invocation. It is not Elemental Conflux. So many people have been asking me why their Elemental Conflux doesn't work, and it is a different skill. Don't use Elemental Conflux. This is an aura. This is a trigger spell. Don't use it. Use the Invocation. And to get the invocation, you just use a spirit gem and click on all gems. And then just type invocation, and it is here. It's this simple. And preferably, you want to use invocation as level 8. It is 9 because I have +1+ from the global modifiers. And the reason why we want to use it as level 8 is because it requires low amount of dexterity. And now for the supports, we of course want to use Comet, and remember always to activate it. And here we are using Inspiration, and the last one is actually something I am testing because there is few choices that you can go for. First thing is I actually tested using the energy retention. It actually does not work with that skill, so I stopped using it. Capacitor makes you have more energy, so instead of having 3 charges of Elemental Invocation, you can have up to 5. But to be honest, most of the time we don't have enough mana to cast all 5 anyway, and I actually kind of like to use Elemental Invocation on cooldown, so basically whenever I have 1-2 charges, I just use it while I'm clearing, so Capacitor is like not that insane, but you can still use it, it's up to you. For now, I've been testing Overcharge, so basically 75% magnitude of shock, so whenever this Comet is hitting enemy, these shocks are huge. So that's what I've been testing. I also have been testing it with Rising Tempest, and I actually think I am gonna end up using this, because this gives it 12% more damage for each skill type used recently, not damage type, that's something you have to remember, just skill type. And we are using Spark, and it has a lightning tag of course, even though it's dealing cold damage, it is still considered lightning skill. so that's plus 12% more damage. And we are of course using things like Comet or Invocation or Frost Bomb in here, which I'm gonna show later. So it also adds additional 12%, but the Elemental Invocation itself actually counts as Lightning, Cold, and Fire. From what I tested, it actually does not count as all three of them for the purpose of Rising Tempest. It just counts as one of them. But if you use the Spark and then let's say you use Comet or something or Frost Bomb and then you use Elemental Invocation, it is going to count as Fire. So you're gonna get 36% more damage. So it is quite a lot. I'm still not sure if it counts for the hit that actually procs it, basically, so that you did use it recently. Would it work only on the next one, or does it immediately work on itself? That's something I don't know, but I assume yes. So, and even though if you are using it decently often, you're gonna use it pretty much every 4 seconds, so it is pretty good amount of damage. But even if the third one still doesn't always work, it's still just 24% more damage, so it's still pretty good. So it is a very good support to use. Now the next one is Frost Bomb. Frost Bomb, I'm just using it to apply exposure, so with magnified effect, strip away for increased effect. And for now I'm using considered casting just so it deals a little bit more damage, but I'm probably gonna replace it with something else in the future. I'm gonna have to think about it. This is not my the biggest issue right now. And Frost Wall still with Spell Cascade, Icicle, and Concentrated Effect. This is something I actually could remove from Frostwall and put on the Elemental Invocation if I want to deal more damage, and then I can put something else on Frostwall, maybe Rising Tempest or something else. And next for the Lightning Warp. Lightning Warp, I'm just using it to travel a little bit and also cool enemies and trigger Shocking Ground. Shocking Ground is pretty good because even though you have maybe low shock duration because of something like the Strike Twice, 50% less shock duration, the Shocking Ground still lasts pretty long amount of time, and if enemies are in that ground, they are always gonna be shocked. And I am supporting it with the Shock Siphon and Soul Drain, so that whenever I'm killing something with Lightning Warp, I'm recovering some Energy Shield. And the last one, Hypothermia, I don't really use it, to be honest. I actually almost never use it. Even on boss, I keep forgetting about using it, but it's just some additional -2 cold resistances. And in weapon swap, I am using Leap Storm with Martial Tempo so that I can leap around a little bit. I'm actually thinking about swapping to the Blink setup. If you are wondering if I heard about it, yes, I did look at it. It's actually looking pretty good, something I'm gonna test. Basically what you can do is you can have Blink and you can use a weapon swap with one hand and a shield, and shield gives you a cooldown, and you can even use a Scepter, so it gives you some spirit. And then you can reserve that spirit on the weapon swap, or you can actually on your weapon swap, you can unreserve something like Cast on Freeze or Invocation and reserve Blink. And it actually remembers what do you reserve on which weapon swap. So you can go here and you can decide that I want Invocation to be on the first one and I don't want it to be on the second one. So when you swap, as you can see, it is being removed. So that's something you can do with Blink, and then you can blink around. So it's definitely something I'm gonna look into later. And also, if you're wondering why I'm not using the life flask, is because I no longer need it, because, well, I don't have any life. And that's basically it. If you have some questions, feel free to leave them in the comments or check out my stream at twitch.tv/ZenM. But of course, this build is still not solved. I'm still figuring things out. Every day I'm swapping some stuff, figuring out more things and improving it. So it's probably gonna be changing daily. When I'm gonna release the next video about updated version, I don't know. Probably gonna do it when I feel like there is enough things to talk about that I actually can make another video about it. But also, one last thing I want to mention is I did make a Maxroll builder, so I'm gonna link it in the description and you can check it out. You can see everything that I'm using here. But remember that, for example, my chest has a reduced bleeding duration. That doesn't mean that you should go for it. It's just something that I have right now, and yeah, not all of these modifiers are just useful. It's just something that I have currently. I just wanted to have 100% my current setup, and I'm gonna be updating this planner as I go. So that's gonna be it for this video. Thanks for watching and see you next time.